One of my San Diego pastor colleagues, while he was preaching a sermon on sex, had noted that there were a lot of people in his church, the older people, who would come to him and say, well, we need to do something about these young people. These young people are just entirely too promiscuous, entirely too sexual. We need to do something about it. And one of the things that this particular pastor happened to know is that there were some complaints about a lack of a sexual relationship going on in some of these marriages. And he was perfectly blunt from the pulpit. He says, unless you're having a good, healthy sexual relationship with your husband or your wife, I don't want to hear you telling all these young people what they should or should not be doing. That he had his standards, of course, that he would teach on and he would preach on. But as far as the nastiness of the judgmentalism, one of the things he was talking about is the way you are treating your spouse, the way you are seeking to be fulfilling for your spouse is part of the example we are setting. Both in the talk and in my awesome sex program, I talk about the concept of a swim, ASWIM, awesome sex when I'm married. If you look around popular media, you will take note that in popular media, who's having sex? Young, hot, and single. How often you see sex scenes that involve married couples? Almost never. How often in romance novels or pornography does the sex involve married couples? Who aren't involved in anything like swinging or cuckolding or anything like that, but a loving expression in a sexual way. You just don't see that. You don't see that in popular media. You don't see that in romances. You don't see that in erotica, and you don't see that in pornography. It is just not a thing we've decided to embed in our culture. I'm not sure why we decided to do that, but apparently we have decided to do that. D.L. Moody. If I wanted to find out whether a man was a Christian, I wouldn't go to his minister. I would go ask his wife. We need more Christian life at home. If a man doesn't treat his wife right, I don't want to hear him talk about Christianity. That was D.L. Moody, Dwight Moody in the 1800s. He died in 1899. Now, it's pretty certain he's not talking about the sexual relationship between husband and wife here, but the principle, I think, is fairly sound. That for too long, sex was treated as something that a woman does, or a woman gives up, or a woman sacrifices herself for her husband, for the man. And I don't think that ought to be. And the fact that a woman's body has the clitoris, the only organ we know of in any creature on earth, any creature God has made, that is engineered solely for the purpose of pleasure, it would seem to me that some attentiveness to her pleasure is in order. So I've got a lot of ground to cover, probably more ground than I ought to cover in one lesson. And I will be frank, I have plenty of material to do an entire next level lesson on awesome sex. Whether I will actually put that together in any kind of a recorded program, I don't know, but I could certainly do a weekend seminar with lovers. But let's take a look at some things. Orgasm. The first measure of orgasm is pleasure, not how it happened. There's talk about vaginal orgasm, the clitoral orgasms, and nipple orgasms, and breast orgasms, and this, that, and that, and whatnot. All that basically boils down to is a lot of women in particular have an incredibly wide range of what does and does not work for them. And what works for one woman doesn't work for another woman. And sometimes what works for one woman at one particular moment in her life might not work in the next particular moment in her life. And so part of it on the woman's side is for her to understand there is a massive range of normal. It's one of those curious things that when you deal with the bell curve of normal distribution, it is quite typical in a whole bunch of traits that there is more variation in men and more homogeneous outcomes in women. But when it comes to sexual response, it flips. that men are much more consistent in their sexual response and women are much more all over the place. And it's all normal. And it's probably something to do with the odd juxtaposition of sexual response and how most other things show up that troubles a lot of women, because if we don't have honest conversation, if we don't have generational conversations, if we don't find the real information, the actual studies, the read good books on the subject, and rather than magazine articles and newspaper articles and blogs that glorify one thing over another thing, then we're not going to know the right information. But here's the thing, as I've been exploring with all of these books I've been sharing with you, is that women's sexual response to a variety of things is enormously varied. Some women can have orgasms having their thigh rubbed, some orgasm having their toe sucked. A lot of women have a very strong positive response to their nipples, some don't. Some like action around the neck and the ears, some hate it. And penile penetration is a very poor way to stimulate the clitoris. And about 1 out of 3 women have orgasms with penetration alone. And so you get all of this incredible variation in female response. And just to understand, nothing's wrong with her. If you're the woman, nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with your technique if you're the man, other than that's just not how her body works. And so what we're going to do is we're going to invest some time in figuring out how the body works and working the body the way it works. Now, one of the big measures of orgasm is pleasure, not how it happens. Not like you're missing out if it didn't happen this way as opposed to that way. And it doesn't even matter if it happens, because the goal of a sexual expression of intimacy is pleasure. And sometimes, honestly, orgasm, the pursuit of ejaculation, the pursuit of orgasm, especially if it's the dogged pursuit by a partner who has this goal in mind. So it's not an expression of connection, an expression of intimacy, an expression of love, an expression of passion. It's a goal-centered activity. We have this place that we're going, and we're going to get there. Sometimes the orgasm becomes a distraction from the pleasure rather than the pleasure itself. And so just keep in mind that orgasm is not the be all and end all, just like erection and ejaculation isn't the be all and end all. And there might be dramatically more overlap between male arousal and an erection and female arousal and lubrication. That men are much more homogeneous in that when men are aroused, they tend to get erections. When men have erections, they tend to be aroused. With women, it's a little bit more disconnected. There's still obviously a connection, but it's a little bit looser connection. She can be craving sex, and her body just says, nope, not doing the lubrication thing. And there's been times where a woman's body can respond with getting wet, even though she has no psychological or emotional desire whatsoever. And so there's more disconnect between the head and the body and where her actual arousal and desire and choices might be for a woman than there is for a man. Why that would be? There's a number of theories, doesn't really matter. What really matters is that's just what happens. But now here gets to be an interesting thing. For the women who are non-orgasmic, or aren't as orgasmic as they might wish, who maybe have an orgasm every once in a while, there's a way to work with that. Now, in particular, there was a sad seminar I attended a while ago, and some of the theme had to do with, it was a Dr. Gray seminar where we was talking about, men mostly need opportunity. That's like the #1 factor for men. If the answer is yes, he's interested. And that tends to be much more often true than not true. While for the woman, there were a whole bunch of buttons and dials and stuff that had to be tuned in and switched on just right. And that has to do with like turning on more of her ons and turning off more of her offs, because there's a lot of ons and there's a lot of offs. And if you have too many of the offs and not enough of the ons, or not enough of the ons, regardless of how the offs are going, then just she's not interested. Her brain's not there and she can't be present for the moment. But one of the curious things that I found, the sad part, is I said, what makes sex memorable for a woman is her orgasm. And what makes sex memorable for a man is her orgasm. Now, my wife and I at the time had a discussion, and she said, my orgasm isn't memorable at all. I call that normal sex. And part of that is that for her, she knew how to kind of what you call find the orgasm and kind of coax it in and then kind of let it wash over her and hit her at whatever level of intensity as it might be available to her. And so orgasm for her was normal. She says, if I try to remember every time I had an orgasm, I'd be remembering 4 to 5 times I had sex. So orgasm wasn't memorable because it was normal, it was common. And so when orgasm is what makes sex memorable for her, and her orgasm is what makes sex memorable to him, that tells me that there's not enough orgasms. And so a non-orgasmic or a low orgasmic woman can benefit greatly by practicing orgasm through masturbation. Now, this part I'm about to share here is a reversal of my previously held position. And since after this lesson, I'm planning on starting my Awesome Sex series, occasionally interrupted with some topics that are going to be relevant to particular holidays and whatnot. If you listen to that, you will hear me teach my original position, which is now totally flipped. I had made assumptions based upon how I understand most things work, and generally speaking, how male sexuality and male response work. But this is why we study things that we think we might already know, things that we think are common sense. It's because sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes things don't work the way we thought they work. Sometimes they don't work the way it's common sense or it's obvious. And on this one, I was wrong. Vibrators and other toys that help a woman achieve orgasm. Whether you're talking about a vibrator, you're talking about any of a number of sex toys, moving things, vibrating things, pulsating things, things that she uses on her clit for stimulation, things that she puts inside of herself. All of those things I had presumed, I think reasonably logically, that if her body learns to respond to that stimuli, then it will learn to not be responsive to what is ordinary male ability. As it works out, the opposite is true. Vibrators and other toys that trigger orgasm in women actually help overall sexual response, help overall orgasmic response. The more a woman masturbates to orgasm, no matter what technique she uses, no matter what toy she uses, the more responsive her body becomes to her lover, even when what she's using to stimulate herself is at odds with what a lover is capable of doing with his own body. Well, and then here gets to be an interesting thing, especially when toys are involved. A big advantage is that when a woman gets responsive to toys, then those toys can be incorporated into their lovemaking. So her pleasure no longer depends upon his body. Now, I will tell you, as a man now in his later 50s, that should be incredibly good news to me, because at my age, it would be quite reasonable if I were to develop a sexual relationship with a woman to suddenly discover that my body is not doing what I would like my body to be doing, that what my body was capable of a decade ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, is not the same level of responsiveness that I would get right here, right now, today in my late 50s. That the testosterone levels of my teens and my 20s aren't the testosterone levels of my 40s and my 50s. The physical responsiveness of my body and the endurance of my body from when I was in the health and the fitness level, especially, and with the physique I had in my teens and 20s, is not the same as the health, the fitness, and the physique that I have in my 40s and 50s. So that's different. But if toys are part of the mix, then that no longer depends upon what my body does. I don't need my body to cooperate. I don't need my endurance to cooperate. I don't need, the timing of things to cooperate because I have options. So it shifts her pleasure to depending upon my commitment and my enthusiasm for her pleasure when she wants it, because she might not always be interested in it. And so for a man and a woman, his erection hardness and longevity and time to ejaculate now matter much, much less if toys and other things are now part of the being a good lover mix. And that becomes part of the investment the couple makes in their shared pleasure. Now, that is especially important for couples as they get older together. It has long been said that men's sexual peak is in their late teens and women's sexual peak is in their 40s. Now, depending upon how one defines sexual peak, that may or may not be true. And when it comes to women's bodies, honestly, and are all over the place. Their sexual responses all over the place. But here gets to be a thing. A meaningful percentage of women, when they get old enough that now they're no longer as concerned about pregnancy. Now they're no longer as concerned about like having to take care of the children. A lot of the classic offs that would distract them from their own sexual pleasure and such are now gone. The children have grown up and moved out of the house. Now they have time to really connect with their lover, to really connect with their husband. And so now she's more free. There are fewer offs, and maybe the ons are still there. But at the same time, as his body ages, his body gets less responsive. His erections get less hard. They don't last as long. Ejaculation becomes much less certain. And then whether it's premature or whether it's, what we call erectile dysfunction, frankly, I don't think it's a dysfunction at all. I just think it's a factor of aging. And so things become more hit and miss for him and probably less hit and miss for her. That when toys now become part of the mix, when he gets skilled with a vibrator that she can use on her, as well as she gets more practice in using the vibrator on herself, and whatever other toys they might be interested in. And maybe he may find, benefit from a cock ring, or he may find benefit from, something else that vibrates for him too. That there's a number of options available, and there's people you can talk to about some of these options. You no longer have to depend upon the body. You no longer have to depend upon things kind of progressing naturally and just automatically being fantastic and mind-blowing. Now, here gets to be a thing. Mutual investment in high point pleasure. Mutual investment. That means that I, as the man, invests, she, as the woman, invests. We, as lovers, invest in our lovemaking. We prioritize our shared experiences. We prioritize our shared pleasure. And we especially prioritize those pleasures we do not want to delegate. Now, while in my notes, I actually have this elsewhere. I'm going to pick up from this one. Do not delegate what you do not want delegated. Invest yourself most in what you want to be the sole fulfillment of, and about as much in what you want to be the primary fulfillment of. Prioritize what you want to make sure your partner will not need to go elsewhere to find. Now, some things totally okay. Hey, if I don't like a particular type of movie, if I don't like a particular type of music, and she heads off with friends, female friends, male friends, doesn't really matter much to me, that can be fine. I do a lot of good company dating. A lot of my good company dates are with married women who have husbands that don't particularly care for the museum, or don't particularly care for that kind of music at a concert, or don't particularly care for this, that, or whatnot. And so I become a male companion who will do the gentlemanly niceties for them and enjoy being good company while enjoying good company. And they know that there's no additional expectation beyond that, that it's just she gets to be the girl or the lady, and she gets to be treated like a lady. She gets to have her outing. And plenty of husbands are totally happy with that. Like, oh my God, that's great, because I know she's with someone who's safe, someone who can keep her safe, someone who's not going to be trying anything, someone who is certainly understands the difference between being primary and secondary. And me being a secondary means I am in support of the primary. That means my presence in her life helps fulfill her in a way that lets her then come home and be a better wife, and come home and be a better lover, come home and be ready to be home, not to be distracted and pulled out. And so for some things, totally okay if your husband or your wife wants to go elsewhere for those things. There's just some stuff we'd rather not do. There's some levels of things where, we'll go spectate. Maybe, I'm not much interested in bowling, but I'll come watch her bowl, and I'll hang out, and I'll, bring my computer, bring my phone, and do something else while I'm there spectating. And when she's, throwing her ball, I'll come and watch, and I may or may not participate. Or she could just head off and go do it herself. But there are other things. You might really prefer you were the only source for. Other things you might prefer you were the primary source for. Focus there. And certainly, based upon the context of me bringing it up here, I think that includes our sexual relationship. I don't want my wife to be sexually frustrated and annoyed. I want her to know that she has a husband, that she has a lover who is invested in making sure she is as fulfilled as a woman can reasonably be in this monogamous lover relationship, so that I am not responsible for leaving her empty and void, where if there's anything else she aches for, that she hungers for, that she feels is this yawning chasm open in her life, that if she goes somewhere else, it's going to be bad. I mean, and I don't mean bad as in she won't enjoy it. I mean bad as in it's going to be damaging to our relationship. Well, to me, I think sex is the ultimate expression of that. I do not want my wife, I do not want my lover having to go somewhere else because I'm not doing my job as her lover. So as part of a mutual investment in high point pleasure, do an investment in self. What preparation do you need to do? If you're going to like craft a romantic evening that's intended to lead to something sexual, both for him or her, for both of you to think, okay, well, like, what about clothes? Or is what you wear going to make a difference? If you're going out for a nice evening out, do you want to do something dressy? Does it matter if you're in shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt, or does it matter if you're dressed up? Does that make a difference for you guys? And it might make a difference in one direction or another. I mean, like, for me, if I'm doing a lot of legal work and I'm in a suit and I'm wearing my shirt and my tie and all of that all day long, what might be much more erotic for me is something casual, where I don't want to be dressed up in business type attire, because to me that feels like work mode. And so it's non-obvious which way this will always go. But if you're going to be doing something for and with your partner for your shared pleasure, like, what would that be? Would you wear your old ratty underwear that she complains about, or would you wear something nicer and newer and maybe colorful, whatever it is that she likes? And obviously the same thing in the other way around. For a lot of women, it can be as simple as, match the bras with the panties. And what else do you wear or not wear? Do you give any thought to how easy something is to take off? Do you give any thought to how this factors into the later lovemaking that will take place? Because there can be some things that it might look good for an outing, but a part of the plan is that this is part of a larger lovemaking episode, that it's not just we're going out on a date. It's that the date is part of our foreplay. And if what, say for instance, she's wearing, I have a friend of mine who does steampunk stuff, and one particular evening she was wearing this thing that had this corset, and one of my jobs was to stay in line of sight, because if she needed to go to the bathroom, she can't get in or out of this thing by herself. She needs someone to loosen it up for her. And if I was available, part of my job was loosen it up, hang out at the bathroom. When she came up, tighten it back up again. But imagine if someone is in a, this is part of foreplay lovemaking, and getting in and out of the clothes afterwards has all of these steps, all of these things. It kind of reminds me of an old cartoon about a Elizabethan or a Victorian era couple with all of these layers. And by the time they finally get naked in bed on their honeymoon night, they're just too exhausted to do anything, because that was a workout. How about rest? Do you need to rest up? Do you need to take a nap? Do you need to relax for a little while so that you'll have enough energy later on? Talking to one couple one time where they realized, when we have sex after 10 o'clock, it gets kind of perfunctory, because by the time we've had our dinner and we've gone to a movie and we get home and now we're tired, we still want to have sex, but it's pretty, in, out, like in, out, done, and that's it, because that's all they have the energy for. So if you're intending on something being more involved than that, like, do you need to take a nap? Do you need to be more rested? And then, here gets to be a curious one that came up. Do you need to stretch out beforehand? Some people have reported like getting cramps in their feet, or cramps in their legs, or cramps in their abs, or depending upon the positions, but sometimes loosening up, stretching out before you go out on your date, because part of the goal is, I am trying to make sure I am investing in my part of myself, so that we are creating this event together. And I don't want to be distracted by being too tight or cramping up. How about as simple a thing as cleaning up? And that could be, obviously taking a shower, because a lot of people don't particularly like the feeling of being icky when they're with their partner. And certainly sometimes if your partner is smelly because they've been, working outside all day, or working out or whatever, you might appreciate them being freshly showered or freshly cleaned up. And and part of it, just as a man, if I'm clean shaven and she likes that clean shaven look and the clean shaven feeling, but if I'm stubbly, if I'm 5 o'clock shadow and I haven't shaved again in the evening, there might be things that I would do that would, like, sandpaper her cheeks or sandpaper her neck, or depending upon how I'm moving down her body, to sandpaper the inside of her thighs or around her chest. That might not be comfortable for her. And it might be helpful for her experience if I've cleaned up and I've shaved again. And then grooming in general, and this is mutual grooming. So what does she like him to do? What does he like her to do? When it comes to, like, what we call manscaping, when it comes to, like, trimming pubic hair, when it comes to trimming body hair, more and more popular is getting rid of back hair. And I got in a habit decades ago, and it was with my first wife, Wendy, where one of the things that she liked about the look of Asians is the hair-free body. Well, I seem to get my hair from my European side. So one of the things that she asked for is if I could trim my body hair. And so we invested in that. And in fact, part of her simple argument is she got like a men's bathing suit catalog, or at least the men's section of a bathing suit catalog. And she flipped through, like, look, no hair, no hair, no hair, token hairy guy, no hair, no token hairy. Oh, same, it's the same guy. They have one token hairy guy. And then she grabbed like a bodybuilding magazine. She flipped through, see, no hair, no hair, no hair, no hair. She grabbed a fitness magazine, see, no hair, no hair, no hair, no hair. Oh, token hairy guy. And so, like, all right, well, and that's a reasonable request. I mean, it's not like she's asking me to go in for like laser hair removal where there's no way to reverse it. And so it was a request that she made. I honored the request, and I found actually I, for myself, like the look better. And so if a woman has a preference one way or the other, honestly, I'm not that invested either way. But even just for myself, I like the look better. It feels sleeker. It feels cleaner to me. But what does she like him to do? Does she want him trimmed? Does she want him hairy? That, if I don't particularly care one way or the other, and I don't know why for some men it's like this masculine thing, like, well, I'm not getting rid of body. I'd get rid of body hair for sports performance, but I'm not going to get rid of body hair to be a better lover to my wife. And why would I want to be a better lover to my wife? But boy, would I want to do anything to get a tenth of a second advantage if I was like a cyclist. But for my wife to be more interested in sex and have more pleasure in the experience, why would I do it then? Now, of course, that's not the way the men phrase it, but that's actually not far off from what I hear when I hear men thinking about, getting rid of body hair. If they find out that I'm doing it for like my martial arts performance, that it helps me in competition somehow, they go, oh yeah. When, they hear that, well, I do that for the pleasure of my wife, they go, what? Why would you do that? And for me, so if your wife had a higher level of desire and a higher level of pleasure, wouldn't you be more willing to invest yourself in that than in getting a probably irrelevant, unless you're at the most elite level, difference in your athletic performance? Seriously? If I were counseling like my daughter and she had a boyfriend that was more willing to invest and sacrifice in his amateur athletic performance that had ultimately no meaning other than did you win, and unwilling to invest a similar thing for the sake of their pleasure and intimacy that they share, I might question that gentleman's priorities. So investing in self, what preparation do you need to do for your own physical body, for your mental state? Clothes, rest, stretching, cleaning up, grooming, and investment in time and place, which is also partially an investment in self, because you have the ons and the offs. And in particular, women tend to have more offs that mean something to them. So it can be as simple a thing as like straightening up, changing sheets, setting up candles and music. And sometimes as simple a thing as if she's in bed with her husband and her brain is going, oh, I need to get those dishes done before I go to bed. Well, that's an off. And if there really are dishes in the sink and she really does need to get those done before bed because they're not soaking or they need to be put in the dishwasher, they're going to be needed tomorrow, that is a distraction. So part of the investment and the time and the place can include things like straightening things up, getting the laundry done, getting the dishes done, getting all the cleanup done, getting the chores done so that she doesn't have all of these things pulling her out of the moment. And then other things like, if the sheets are clean and fitted tightly, and then other scenario things of, the music and candlelight and how all of that's going to factor in. Or it could be an investment in time and place in making plans to rent a room for a staycation, just to get completely away from the place of responsibilities. Because sometimes just being in that place of responsibility can be a distraction. And then if you're in another place, there's zero fear of someone walking in or someone hearing something. Because sometimes, and I've run into this, and it's reasonably understandable, is that the kids have been sent off to like his parents, her parents. So they're not in the house, they're staying somewhere else. So they know that they're alone. But because the home is so closely associated with the kids are here, the kids are running around, the bedroom is right there, that there's still all of these things that go, oh, the kids could hear, wait, they're not here, that's okay. Well, that already pulled her out of her brain and had to process some logical cognitive thought process to land back in, oh, the kids are gone, I don't have to be worried about making noise. Well, by then she's already interrupted herself. And so even when you've actually made the necessary arrangements, you can still sometimes have these kind of distractions. And so if you're trying to do something more gourmet, something more adventurous, sometimes it can be helpful if you can be someplace else. Be someplace other than that normal place of responsibilities. Be someplace other than the normal place where all the offs and all of the distractions are. And then if you're going to try something interesting, like outdoor sex, maybe in your own yard, or beach sex, or picnic sex, or like what do you need to make that work for you both? Do you need a different kind of picnic blanket? Do you need something to wrap yourself up in? Do you need to lay out cushions or a mattress or an air mattress or something like out in the yard? Do you need to find the place that the neighbors can't see? Whatever it is you're going to do, what are all of the relevant variables to that? And is this something that is within the realm of something you've discussed? Because if I make plans to do something, I think, oh, it would be so erotic to like go have sex on the back patio overlooking the city and like all of the lights out there. And the only thing she can think of is like, what if someone down there has a telescope and they're watching us? Or she's never thought about having sex under those circumstances. You're going, no. And like all of her offs get triggered and almost none of her ons. And I'm thinking I'm doing this romantic, erotic thing. And she's going, no. Things like that might need to be crafted very, very differently. Maybe if that's a direction we agree, it's like, well, like it doesn't do anything for me, but I'm not really opposed to it, but it's just there's other things on my mind. Well, in which case, craft a romantic time. Craft maybe a makeout time where nobody's naked, clothes are on, you're warm and you're comfy and you're cuddling, but you're not going there. So even if like some random person out there happened to have a telescope pointing in your direction, all they're going to see is a couple making out, and they're not going to see any nakedness or anything. And so you figure out what will work for both of you, and then you help craft it accordingly. And then there's an investment in toys. When you're investing in toys, yes, there's a lot of information available online, and the online information can be hit and miss. I mean, when I was doing research going into some of the series, they kind of fill in some of my blanks and double check some of my assumptions and kind of expand on the information where I have experience and I have observation and I have conversation, but experience, observation, and conversation is a fairly limited sample size. And so I also try to do a lot of reading, a lot of study, get a lot of additional information, because I want to know more than my personal experience. I want to know more than my experience plus my personal observation of things that I've interacted with in some meaningful way. And I want to know more than I've learned in direct conversation, because all of that, that there's a certain, type of circle that I run in, and my information will tend to reflect the circles that I run in. And so I get additional outside information. And when I was doing some of my investigating of toys and such, it's hit and miss. I mean, ultimately, I went to someone who does this for a living. And as part of how she makes her living, it has to do with being a sex educator. And so she has the information, she knows what the issues are. And then I ask her for advice and I ask her for input and I ask her for her book recommendations. And that's where I got a lot of this. Also, yes, you can go to any of many sex shops and ask questions. Now, one of the advantages of going to a shop and asking questions is honestly the men and the women who work at many of these, much more like legit. I'm not talking about like your CD dive type things. So a lot of people kind of think of some porn stores and such that I've visited many of these stores, and they're clean, they're educational, they have books, they have all the toys, and the people have a tremendous amount of information. And so you can have conversations, and they can tell you what things are, and they can tell you how things work, and they can tell you various issues with them. And if you tell them kind of what you're thinking and what you're looking for, they can offer you some guidance. And so that's a way to go. And you might, depending upon how comfortable you are with stuff like that, want to go visit them in stages. Maybe the first time you just kind of go walk in and kind of see what's there, and that's as far as you can go. And the next time you kind of walk in and you like really look at some stuff that might be potentially interesting, and then maybe after that you ask some questions. You might be too embarrassed to ask questions, that's fine, but you can go look at things, you can actually see what it looks like, and then you can like go look it up online later on to try to learn more about individual things, that you're not just looking at a picture and trying to figure it out, that you can see the actual thing and then try to figure it out from there. There's also at least one direct marketing company that I know of where someone, typically a woman, can come and have very open and honest conversations with a woman who might be hesitant to go to a shop. Now, a note about anything new. Maybe it works out great the first time. Maybe not. Take it easy at first. It's better to figure out that you can go more all in and then go more or harder next time than it is to push too far in one go and create a terrible emotional connection. Because that's back to that emotional association of ons and offs again. And so if you take it easy and go like, yeah, we could do more of that. Oh yeah, it's like that harder, that faster would be nice. Or sometimes you'll find it's like, yeah, that slowing down would be nice. In particular, talking to women about like the use of vibrators, is it's tempting because sometimes she can get there fast, for him to want to run her there fast. But she says most of the time she likes to take it slower. While her body can respond faster and that orgasm can show up sooner, that she likes the linger. And so you might start off easy, and if the woman says faster, or the woman says harder, or the woman says more, well, you can always speed it up. But sometimes it's easier to kind of begin more slowly. Some things might start slow and get to higher and higher levels of expression, like the use of toys. It might start off totally private to start. I mean, she might be even really uncomfortable with the idea that her husband even knows that she has a vibrator. And certainly uncomfortable with the idea even that she knows, or she's using it in the room when he's in the house. And so she might want like more privacy than that. And so like, can you like go run an errand or something? And even that might be like a little almost embarrassing to her. But whatever it takes for her to be comfortable starting, whatever it takes for him to be comfortable starting, whatever it is, if it's a new thing that you've agreed to explore together, be willing to take as small a step as necessary to be able to take a step. And so it might be a private thing to start, and maybe a do it under the covers so that you can feel your way around, but like no one's watching kind of thing. And so sometimes later, a bit of a show. I mean, I've certainly talked to women who have enjoyed her lover enjoying watching her masturbate with her vibrator. And on his part, he's enjoyed not just like the show aspect of it and the exhibitionism of it, which sometimes is part of her pleasure, but the learning, saying, okay, so that's what she likes. That's the pace that she likes. That's what I will do when I'm the one playing with the toy. And that learning then allows it when it's his turn to play, he has a better idea what he's doing. He can see where the spots are. He can see where the angle is. He can see what the movements are. And then, his first level of thing is like, okay, now that I'm the one holding the toy, how well can I do on her body what I watched her do, and be able to have real life feedback, which might seem a little clinical the first time. If she's going, oh, no, a little higher, no, kind of do circles or press a little hard, no, not a little lighter than that. That's perfect. Okay, and now like turn it up to the slightly higher set. No, back down, stay here for a while longer. And it might be very, very clinical the first, 1, 2, 3 times before someone's comfortable enough of just expressing one's sexuality and expressing one's love and expressing one's intimacy this way, because, Sometimes it can take a little while to kind of figure out what you're doing. She might want to control the toys during sex, or she might want to turn them over to start with. I mean, who knows? When you're adding new things, it's all over the place. And so that's radical communication and radical consent. If you want to have a creative, adventuring, explore the outer boundaries of pleasure kind of sexual relationship, it might be a leap, or it might be a series of really small steps. Now, part of how so many things came to my attention is I was teaching on submission, and of course, I'm a martial artist. And a woman had come to me as a sexual submissive, asking if I had any, or if I could teach her boyfriend how to choke her without hurting her. And thus my introduction to the BDSM world. Now, here's been a curious thing as I've been exploring more. In the idea of submission as a gift to the submitted, whether you're talking about the biblical wives submit to your husbands, or you're talking about submission in the bedroom, I find the principles seem to largely be the same, which is part of how come I ended up in some of these conversations. What is often the case, not universally, but often the case, is that she wants to be dominated in the bedroom. But here's a key. She wants to be dominated, and because I'm putting that in quotes, in a way that pleasures her. And I've run into this idea with woman after woman. Now, notice not universal, but I'm starting to think it could be as much as like 80-20, that this seems to be a thing. But then here is one of the big keys. It's not that she wants to be dominated and used and abused for his pleasure. It's that she wants to be able to let go. She wants to be able to not have to be thinking, not have to be making judgments and decisions and figuring things out in the middle of the experience. She wants to just be able to experience it. And so it's not that she wants to be used, it's that she wants him to take control so she doesn't have to. And again, remember, this is more like an 80-20 thing. And even for the 80, where it might be a thing that she likes, it might not be a thing she wants to have always be the case all of the time, because of the way the collection of ons and offs work in kind of the flocks of her arousal, of the flock of on and off switches. But here gets to be a curious part of all of this. The Shades of Grey series. Now, I will be upfront that I haven't read the books, and so I'm just going based upon reviews I've seen and feedback I've gotten from people. There's apparently a series of movies. I don't know if they made, I think there were going to be 3 of them. I don't know if there were, but I did watch the first one, so I have some frame of reference for what we're talking about. But the Shades of Grey series sold 150 million copies worldwide. 150 million. Now, here's a curious thing, is the books are widely regarded as being poorly written. They're widely regarded by anyone connected to the BDSM community. They are considered a terrible representation of BDSM because of the lack of the 2 key components before one goes into anything kinky of radical communication, radical consent. Because there's very little communication. She's asked to like sign away her consent without knowing what this is she's supposedly consenting to. And so there's no communication. Now she's making a radical consent, but because there's no radical communication, she's actually not consenting to any given individual thing. And so part of BDSM has to do with that radical communication, radical consent. And so it's both considered poorly written as far as literature goes. It's considered a terrible representation of BDSM. So for people from the BDSM community I've talked to about it, they say, oh my God, that's a terrible book. That's not the way you do that. That is so disrespectful. That is so over the top controlling. And so even if there's a a submissive woman who's looking for a dom in the BDSM community, the Shades of Grey books are a terrible example for that. And yet, 150 million copies sold from that series. Now, that really seems to say something in this modern feminist era world, because if you look at that level of total submission, that level of you can do to me anything you want, that level of, yeah, I'm just here for your pleasure, and at the time I'm giving my consent, there's not even any thought as to whether I'm going to enjoy it at all. And yet 150 million women buy these books, or at least 150 million copies of this book get purchased. Now, how many of them actually got read? Of course, stuff like that, I don't know. How many of them got passed around to multiple women? Of course, I don't know. But that's got to be relevant somehow, right? Now, note that while pornography is often thought of as a man thing, women are also consumers of pornography at, based upon the numbers I'm seeing, a little less than half the rate of men. And so it's something like a quarter, 1 out of 4 men say that they're regular users of pornography, and about 1 out of 8 to 1 out of 10 women also say they are regular users of pornography. And depending upon the questions they're asking and what they're talking about, those numbers will vary substantially. But it does seem to be that numerically, about half as many percentage-wise as men use some form of pornography, women also use similar forms of pornography. And women dominate the romance novel market. The romance novel market is a $1 billion a year market. $1 billion a year market. Studies show that women are just as responsive to erotica as men are when it's designed to their sexual tastes. So in the context of sex is all about the man and it's not about the woman, and sex is about total egalitarian and not having any polarity, and nobody should have control in the bedroom. Just remember, romance novels, $1 billion a year. The 50 Shades series, 150 million books. And so there seems to be a lot of female interest in adventurous sexual adventure, but it needs to be the kind of the shared pleasure adventure, the shared experience of the sexual joy, the shared expression of intimacy, the shared expression of love, the shared expression of desire for one another. And so in this mix for both men and women, but I'm largely talking to my fellow men here, get the help you need. Now, especially for someone my age, if you need supplements, get supplements. If you need pills, get pills. Now, here's something that baffles me. Somehow, some men seem supplementation and medication as somehow being an indictment on their masculinity. That even if they're getting the little blue pill, that they don't want to admit it. Like, well, it just means we're getting older. And it means that we're being attentive to being a quality lover for our partner. So I don't understand why it would apply to sexual performance any more or any less than any other things that we supplement for and medicate for, any other health, fitness, and medical issues that we get supplements to help with, or we control our diet, or we get more exercise, or we do a thing, or we get medication, including self-medication for. And yet, for whatever reason, a lot of men have expressed an issue with it. Taking things that empower us as lovers to be better lovers is a powerful act that I think is a clear demonstration of one's commitment to partner pleasure. So take responsibility for birth control, take responsibility for disease control, take responsibility for condoms, take responsibility for vasectomies. That If you've decided you do not want to have a child with this woman, whether it's that, you're husband and wife and you've already had all the kids you want, whether that's 0 or whether that's 4 or whether that's 6, take responsibility and do the things that like you would need to do on your side rather than like dropping it all on her all the time. And do the things you need to do to be a better lover. Back to D.L. Moody. If I wanted to find out whether a man was a Christian, I wouldn't go to his minister. I would go and ask his wife. We need more Christian life at home. If a man doesn't treat his wife right, I don't want to hear him talk about Christianity. Well, me here now in the 21st century, if I want to know if a couple has a loving relationship, if they are expressing the fullness of their God-given sexuality, if they are fulfilling the sexual aspect of their spousal covenant with one another, if they are building the love that can be expressed sexually, if they're building the honor that can be expressed sexually, if they're doing the holding that can lead to the having, if they're doing the cleaving that creates the partnership, that when they're in the bedroom, or not necessarily in the bedroom, but when they are expressing themselves physically, they're expressing themselves physically when they express the relationship, that they both have the relationship and they have the willingness and the ability to drop their guards with each other so much because they are safe with one another, to just be and to express and to share, so that you can have a swim, awesome sex when I'm married. And so that our sexual relationships between husbands and wives, our sexual relationships inside committed relationships, can be the standard bearer of this is what sex is like when you have this level of commitment. And to do this kind of investment, it is to me a fairly sad indictment on men in particular, but I also see it with women, of how much work they will do in their physical appearance, in their style of dress, in the things that they say, and the things that they do, and the dates that they craft, and the vacations they will take a woman on to get laid by some woman that's a conquest to them, but they're not a wife. I would like whatever that is, whatever that pickup artist orientation is, I think, and this is my personal point of view on this, if I'm a friend with a woman, she deserves good Scott. If I am on a date with a woman, she deserves more good Scott. It should be an upgrade to be on a date with me than to be a non-date friend. If she becomes my girlfriend, that should be an upgrade. She should get more of my best me, more of my better investment, and up to courting and up to marry. My wife should get a greater investment from me, seeking to craft an experience that will ultimately manifest in an expression of love and intimacy in the bedroom than some chick I'm trying to get laid by. And that progression, to me, is important. It's part of the upgrade. That the more intimate you get and the more elevated your status gets, it's not the, oh, thank God, now I don't have to keep on doing that. It's, I get to do this at a higher level. I get to be a better lover. I get to invest even more in my wife. I get to invest even more in my husband. I get to express more freely because now we're married. That there should be a progression that keeps going onward and upward in a grand adventure that gets even more adventurous as you go and more invested and more intimate and more powerful as you go. So for some people, they'll use some of the awesome sex information to try to be better lovers in their casual relationships. I understand that's how it's likely to be used. What I would wish for, though, is that it is seeking to be better lovers as you have more intimate and more adventurous manifestations of your intimacy, your love, and your commitment as you continue to move forward, and that you always have this space to continue to expand the expression of your relationship, especially in the realms where you want to be the sole source of fulfillment. And I think for most people, it's pretty obvious that whatever else might be included in that category, sex is definitely in that category. This is Pastor Scott Conway at Questia.